I had this other interesting concept that reminded me of that really fits with this headline out of China, because Amir Taki was talking about, he showed a clip from Lewis Mumford, who is an American historian and cultural commentator, who was referring about B.F. Skinner, who is a psychologist who had that idea of conditioned behavior and positive reinforcement, and how positive reinforcement is actually a more terrifying form of tyranny, because people think that, you know, they're being rewarded and they think that they're actually having some sort of free choice, and they actually feel like they're creating some sort of better society, when in fact it's a totalitarian, maybe authoritarian society. Because here is a headline about that social credit score in China, where it's actually spreading across the world. China's social credit system could interfere in other nations' sovereignty. China's social credit system, a big data system for monitoring and shaping business and citizens' behavior, is reaching beyond China's borders to impact foreign companies, according to new research. The system, which has been compared to an Orwellian tool of mass surveillance, is an ambitious work in progress, a series of big data and AI-enabled processes that effectively grant subjects a social credit score based on their social, political, and economic behavior. Now, we've covered this story, but where this research leads to is that, in fact, it's starting to impact Western corporations, Western businesses, how they behave. They have to modify their own behavior in order to access the market and the consumers in China. So this also lends in with the positive reinforcement of that B.F. Skinner had pushed, which I'll show.
Yes, B.F. Skinner, you know, he had an amazing insight, didn't he? Because before his work, people were beaten into submission and beaten and tortured to do what the state wanted them to do. And then it was assumed at that time that to get people to act against their own self-interest would be very expensive. You'd have to entice people with huge kind of financial compensation. But what B.F. Skinner showed is that people will act against their own interest for a very small carrot, a nickel, a penny. They'll act against their own self-interest because people are silly in that way. And so China is capitalizing on this with the social networking score. And they're getting people to give away their sovereignty, not that they had any in China to begin with, but they're giving away what remains of it for a score on the social networking, which gives them maybe an extra piece of candy at the drugstore. If they don't do what the state wants, they can't get on public transportation. They get, thrown off the grid. And so, this is now playing out globally because people who want to do business with China, it's creeping into the global business infrastructure. So American corporations that want to do business with China, China's saying that's great, but you've got to buy into our social networking grid and social score. And American corporations, of course, being victimized by the same B.F. Skinner-like draw into obedience, are saying, well, whatever, man, because we'll do it for a nickel. Warren Buffett's not a penny on the street he won't bend over and crack a knee for.
I mean, we have covered, and many in the media have covered the negative aspects of it, that you're punished if you have a bad social credit score. You won't be allowed on the plane. They excluded millions of people from flying home this past holiday season. But it's the positive reinforcement that you could see acting throughout our societies already. Look at London. It's a huge construction zone. It's a disaster area, I would say, but nevertheless, a lot of people think it's great because the positive reinforcement is, if you're a good citizen, if you're a good sort of person, then we'll give you, say, this help to buy. We'll give you 15% of credit if you go further into debt, because that's the sort of citizen we want, one that is in debt and speculating on property markets. And here, how they control people with positive reinforcement and get them to buy into this system is that citizens with high credit scores can access better hotels, rental homes, and even schools, while those with low credit scores can be temporarily or permanently banned from taking planes or trains, as happened to 6.15 million people in 2017 on the government's own figures. A pilot version of the scheme run this year in Hangzhou City reportedly saw citizens with high social credit ratings get free access to gym facilities and shorter public hospital waiting times. On the business side, the Brookings Institute has reported that business that pay tax on time and abide by government demands will get better loan conditions and easier access to public tenders. Non-compliant businesses will face more difficult business conditions. So look at our system whereby certain banks get free access to cheap credit, 0% interest rates, and the government, the Treasury will actually take all your bad debts off your books if you behave in a certain way, if you provide basically a financial system that favors them and the people who are the elite.
Right. The fiat money system is dying. And so people are going to take money out of the fiat currency and put it into crypto. And they're going to have two broad paths to choose. They can put their cash into obedience coin, which would be this China social networking score, and hope to get more frequent flyer miles and a free wingding down at the Xinjiang. Or they can go down the Bitcoin path, which is individual sovereignty. And you're opting out of state control. And that's the war of the 21st century. And this is how different states are going to react differently to the presence of crypto. In some countries, all cash is gotten rid of completely. It's completely electronic cash, like Sweden, for example. So people now have to make this choice. Are they going to go down obedience coin and give their life away for a free donut? Or are they willing to stand up and be sovereign individuals? Obviously, B.F. Skinner would say that people will never organize themselves in a productive capacity to be free of tyranny.
Well, and again, like here you have these people who are being rewarded handsomely if they are obedient. And they probably feel like they are good citizens and they're like good people and they wear certain colored ribbons or wristbands and, signaling, virtue signaling, essentially. They're virtue signaling their good compliance with the norms. You see this all the time on Twitter in our own economies and our own cultures and societies, whereby people will say, I have nothing to hide. I don't care if the government takes all my data and spies on me. I have nothing to hide, because they don't realize that an economic and politically sovereign individual actually does have a lot to hide, because you have your own free thought, you have your own free assembly, and that is something worth treasuring and hiding and protecting from these corporations, from these data miners, from these authoritarians.
The prizes you get for obedience now are relatively good. A free donut in a few years will seem like a king's ransom. But as more people opt in to obedience coin, those prizes are going to shrink from a donut to a virtual donut crumb.
Inflation in obedience coin. It's not a deflationary currency.
No. And so you end up with the casino gulag. So you have people plugged into their electronic devices, playing virtual casinos all day, being obedient, not questioning authority, and then, like any casino, they'll win an occasional virtual donut crumb, and it'll fill their heart with joy, and they'll think about having, some kind of ritualistic ceremony to celebrate their great fortune in the obedience coin world.
I think you have to obey the time and go to break.
Yeah, speaking of obedience, we got to take a break. When we come back, the legendary Amir Taki. Don't go away.